All right, I think we're live. So hello, welcome. This is a bit of an impromptu stream. I figured that I would do this live just to save myself filming a video, rendering it, uploading it, wasting space. So I'll just do it live, direct onto the channel, so to speak. And it is 50 years of Pink Floyd, a personal discussion. Again, impromptu. I didn't even know this was coming up, and it's not really the 50th anniversary of Pink Floyd as a band, more the 50th anniversary of their first studio album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which came out on this day 50 years ago in 1967. Now, obviously, if you're not a fan of Pink Floyd, this is probably going to mean nothing to you, and I'm not really going to try and sum up the history of the band or anything like that. I was doing a series where I was going through all the albums, which seemed to just kind of stop. I wish I'd continued with that because there's a few other albums that I'm not too familiar with, which I probably should be, considering the huge fan I am. Pink Floyd is my favorite band of all time, very closely followed by Rush at the #2 spot. But Pink Floyd has been a huge influence in my life, and I've been a fan for almost 10 years now. So what I'm going to do is go through my personal journey with the band, how I got into the band, some of my personal memories related to the band, going to see various iterations of the band, and then finally I'll wrap up with my ranking of their 15 studio albums in terms of my favorites, and I can talk a little bit about each of them as I go along. So Pink Floyd was a band that I'd heard about mainly through The Wizard of Oz to begin with. It was that classic, you know, oh, if you play The Dark Side of the Moon with The Wizard of Oz, it syncs up perfectly, and there's all these weird coincidences. And it's a fun theory, but it kind of falls apart for me when, you know, the album's over halfway through the film. You know, it's like, okay, so what happens then? Oh, well, you have to play it over again. It's like, well, it doesn't quite work. If The Wizard of Oz was like 40 minutes long, maybe there'd be some weight to it. But you know, it's a fun kind of you know, urban legend, you know, that Pink Floyd tried to sync up their album with The Wizard of Oz. You can kind of do that with a lot of things. Anyway, that's all I really knew of the band for most of my life. You know, I probably heard Another Brick in the Wall, Comfortably Numb, you know, just little bits and pieces. Was never really aware of it that much. When I was a teenager and I was wrestling, I remember going up to London, you know, many times, and a lot of the wrestlers I used to hang around with were heavily into smoking weed. And a lot of them like Pink Floyd, and so us kind of non-weed smokers would sometimes comment on it, and some of the guys would say, "Oh, Pink Floyd, it's just a druggy band, you know, you can't really enjoy that unless you're on drugs, you know, it's just this you know, a weed, you know, infused kind of music which you could only get into if you were high." So yeah, obviously I had no impetus to go and check out the band whatsoever, but even then, you know, I enjoyed music when I was a kid. You know, I liked all the top 20, top 40 stuff. I'd watch that every weekend on MTV and enjoyed the popular music that was coming out at the time. In that sense, I actually really loved music when I was a kid. My dad was big into rock and roll, you know, blues, things like that, and he would give me lots of his CDs and things. He was in a band, so I would go along to that all the time. But really, I never really appreciated music. And throughout my teenage years, it was the same. A lot of my music experience was through using it to make videos of wrestling. So it would be just like heavy metal, rock, stuff like that. Just stuff that made wrestling look cool. That was, again, my only kind of real interest in music. When Pink Floyd came around and I finally got into them, that's when I really appreciated music, and it kind of opened up a whole new world for me as far as enjoying other bands and really listening to music and getting something more out of it than just, oh, that sounds cool. In 2005, I came back from a wrestling show. I'd been up in the valleys in Wales in Blaenau all day wrestling, did like 3 matches, came back home, was exhausted but happy with everything that happened, and Live 8 was happening. And I think when I got home, The Who would just come on stage and were performing. And then Pink Floyd came out at the very end. And I remember lying down on the sofa, but I don't remember really taking it in. So I guess that was kind of the first time I saw Pink Floyd. And that was ironically the last time they ever played together as the core 4 group. And again, I'm not going to go into too much of the history of the band. Just assume that you know it, I suppose. And then it was 2007, 10 years ago now. It would be at the end of 2007, December. I had gone through a pretty bad breakup, was wallowing in depression and just misery, you know, and when you're in that state of mind, you kind of just watch whatever's on TV at the time. And so there was a documentary on at the end of 2007. It was 40 years of Pink Floyd. I think the documentary is called Which One's Pink? The Story of Pink Floyd. And I thought, oh, I'll watch this. So I watched it and I became entranced with not just the music, but the story of the band, the tumultuous history of the interpersonal relationships between all the band members, and how they, you know, how the tragic beginnings of Pink Floyd with the front man who went mad and literally, you know, it's so tragic. And then they carried on, they morphed it into something bigger. They became this huge band. And then the success and all that stuff led to the, not, oh, wow, someone's starting to mow their lawn. That's just perfect. I'm going to hope that you can't hear that as much as I can, because, I mean, I don't think there's much I can do. Anyway, okay, it's going off a bit. Right, well, I'll carry on. So yeah, they became this huge band, and then they splintered off again, and it became something else, it became something different. And, you know, I just loved the story of that, and wanted to check out more of the music. So what I did was I downloaded some of the albums, and I listened to The Dark Side of the Moon all the way through. And what I did, what very vivid memory. Again, I was still feeling pretty shit. I put it all on my my little MP3 player. Went down to an Indian restaurant, got a piece of naan bread and a can of Coke, and I walked from the town center all the way down to the beach, which was a path I hadn't taken since I was a kid, really. So all these memories were flooding back to me, and this music was really getting to me, and it just was something like I'd never heard before. It wasn't one of those, again, top 40 hits where it's just like catchy chorus. It was more introspective and deep, you know. And I went down to the beach. The waves are crashing up against the side of the promenade. I walked all the way down there. I walked up to the cliff tops overlooking the I think it's the Bristol Channel. And I won't go into too much more of that night, because it's a very, again, it's one of those nights I'll never forget for more than one reason. But that was when I first listened to Pink Floyd properly, as they probably are in their best form, I think, when you listen to an entire album from start to finish. That kind of happened in the 60s, where it became less about hit singles, more about hit albums. You know, that's what they were trying to sell more. The Beatles kind of went that way, you know, and just did their studio albums. And then Pink Floyd in the 70s were creating these album length experiences, you know, that either told a story or were all linked in some way. Although some of those songs on their albums became quite popular, like Money and so on, and Another Brick in the Wall and whatever. So after that, I made it a personal mission to dive into Pink Floyd. Like, I wanted to know everything. And I'd never done this with a band before. I'd done it with movies before. So I wanted to try and give this band that I'd gotten so interested in the same level of care and attention I'd given to movies and movie stars and trivia about movies, the making of movies and behind the scenes. So I remember walking down the street one day, and I'm literally thinking, like, all the band members' names in my head, like Richard Wright piano, Nick Mason drums, David Gilmour guitar, Roger Waters lyricist, Richard Wright piano. Like, I was just like, I wanted to learn everything. And it was really fun. And I got into their other albums, and then I started kind of taking the time to just listen to one of the albums and listen to it again and listen to it again and get into it and learn the lyrics a little bit and kind of sing along in my head, I suppose. I didn't rush it, you know. And you could really say I didn't rush it, because it's been 10 years and there's still a couple of the albums I haven't really listened to properly. So that says a lot. I mean, there's only about 3 or 4 in kind of the earlier period that I haven't really, nothing really grabbed me too much. Beyond that, 2008 was a year that was just kind of dominated by Pink Floyd to me. It just it became my my life support in a lot of ways when I was going through these rough times, and I could just escape into this world where, I don't know, it was just it was a real big help, even though a lot of their music is very melancholy and I think would probably just serve to further your kind of downbeat feeling. But at the same time, it gave me this weird boost that I probably really needed, I guess. It was a new interest, and while it never panned out the way I thought it might have, because I started to get into the idea of playing music myself and getting a guitar and trying to learn it and things like that. I got a bass guitar from my dad, didn't really get very far with that. Bought my own guitar not long after that, and, you know, I can play guitar kind of, but not really. So it was what it was in that sense, but it was also, again, it opened the door to me experiencing other bands like The Who, like Rush, and really listening to lyrics and kind of getting into a story and being taken somewhere more than just a catchy tune. You know, there was something deeper you could read into it. You could, almost like a book in a way, where you listen to these well-written lyrics with this well-performed music, and it's telling you a story, but you're also kind of telling the story to yourself, because you can apply it to things in your life and you can create this own narrative in your head with music like that, I think. And that's what really interested me about it and what I really loved about it. And following that, I met Connie, my fiance. And at the time, I was still in a huge Pink Floyd kick. And one of the things we first did before we even met was we listened to Wish You Were Here, the album, together while she was in Norway, I was in the UK, and we kind of listened to it at the same time and were commenting on it as it was going along. And so she got into the music quite a bit as well. And so Pink Floyd was also a big part of the early stages of our relationship. And so I think fondly back on some of those songs that we listened to together and things like that. In 2011, I went to go and see Roger Waters. He was performing The Wall live in, where was it, the O2 Arena or the Millennium Dome, whatever they call it these days. It was going on in 2011. And I thought, I've got to go. I got to take this chance to see at least one member of Pink Floyd. So I went along, and it was incredible. And that was an amazing weekend where I went up to Glasgow and saw Rush. It's kind of just stayed overnight in the bus station in Glasgow in freezing weather. It was horrible. But then I went back down to London, saw Roger Waters. It was a mental weekend. But in fact, I did a vlog series of that, but I had to take it down. I should probably try and put those back up again. But The Wall was an incredible experience. Not my favorite album, but it's one that is fun to listen to if you're in the right mood for it. And it's just this big story. Again, this rock opera. And to see this actual physical, like 50-foot wall being built brick by brick on the stage as you're watching this 2-hour show, and then finally they push it down and it explodes, was quite an incredible thing. And one of my favorite memories of that show was there's a guy who does a Pink Floyd podcast, kind of like 2-hour-long podcast with lots of different live recordings, kind of, stuff like that you don't hear on official releases. And he's fairly big in the Pink Floyd community, I suppose. And one day I made this kind of hour-long mix of all my favorite Pink Floyd songs, but kind of like melded together with different sound effects layering over each other and stuff. I sent it over to him and he used it on the podcast. So that was really cool. And a lot of people liked it, and it was a fun little thing to be involved in. And so I went to see The Wall in London, and as I came out, he was stood near the entrance. I was like, "Oh, you're the guy who does a podcast, right?" He's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "I'm the guy who did the mix." He's like, "Oh, cool." Shook hands, and it was just one of those random things. I guess he would be there because he's at all of these kind of big shows. But it was a fun little experience there. And there was a nice old guy I was sat next to as well, and we were kind of chatting about how I got into the music and stuff. And yeah, just it was a really nice experience. And I'm not if I had to pick between the band members, it wouldn't be Roger Waters. It would be David Gilmour, who's probably my favorite musician, I guess, the front man of Pink Floyd, the singer and guitarist. But what made the band so special, let's just get into that for a second, to me, is that it went through so many different iterations. You listen to their first album and then their last, and it's night and day. But throughout all of it, there's this thread that holds it together, this interesting quality that it's still Pink Floyd in a way. And they started in a very Beatles-esque manner with, very playful songs and kind of, psychedelic music, which was led by their frontman at the time, Syd Barrett, who took too many drugs and, addled his brain as the story goes. And so they had to carry on without him. And they changed into something a bit more progressive. And then by the time they got to the 70s, that's when they did their most popular stuff. And then they splintered off, and Roger Waters left. And what made their kind of core most popular period the best was, for me, I think Roger Waters is a great lyricist, and I think David Gilmour and Richard Wright are great musicians. Not to discredit Nick Mason, but I think that kind of combination of Gilmour and Wright's kind of delicate kind of way of producing music, and Roger Waters' very fiery and agenda-driven lyric writing and kind of fronting of the band made such a unique combination that made albums like Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here and Animals so impactful. By the time you get to The Wall, it's more of a Roger Waters-led thing. And then you get the David Gilmour-led thing in the 80s when they did the Momentary Lapse of Reason and then the Division Bell and so on. So there's loads of different periods, and I guess some people like some more than others. And I have my favorites, of course. But it's a band that has just delivered such an interesting body of work that lasted, I guess, thinking about it, only about 30 years, really, because their last album was in 1994. So just shy of their 30th anniversary, that would be, right? Yeah. even though they released an album a couple of years ago, which was more of an offshoot of their last album anyway. So it would be really interesting if they had carried on, or if Roger Waters had come back, or if David Gilmour had simply kept going. And obviously the death of Richard Wright was a huge part in kind of dissolving any reunion after they did that incredible show at Live 8 in 2005, where all four of them played together one last time. And there's something special about that. That's probably my favorite kind of musical performance ever. It's just 20 minutes. You know, Roger Waters comes back, they all play the music together, and that's it. One and done. Never happened again. And that was difficult for me when I first got into the band, was when Richard Wright passed away, like about, I don't know, 6 months after I became a fan. It was kind of really heartbreaking. I remember David Gilmour was doing an interview on Jules Holland like a couple of days after it happened, and he was promoting his new live album, which Richard Wright was on. And you could just tell he was gutted. He was devastated. He was there to promote this thing, but he just, you know, yeah, that was kind of difficult. And anyway, so I saw Roger Waters in 2011. 2015 came around, and at that point, David Gilmour hadn't done any shows in years, and it seemed like he was completely done with music. And then they came out with the new Pink Floyd album in 2014, The Endless River, which was more of a, you know, kind of a goodbye to the band, using some of the stuff they'd recorded when Richard Wright was still alive, and kind of releasing this coda to the band's career. And a lot of people don't like it. I love The Endless River. I think it's a really great album. It's my kind of thing. It's not something you can sit down and listen to all the time, but if you got the time to sit down for an hour and listen to some music that will take you somewhere, I think The Endless River is something that I'm a big fan of. So I was like, wow, okay, so they're doing that. Maybe he'll do a show? No? Okay. And then he announced he was doing another solo album and that he would be doing a tour to accompany it. And I thought, oh my God. And so Connie very awesomely booked me a ticket for David Gilmour in September 2015 at the Royal Albert Hall in London, under the kind of agreement that I would sort out my own travel to literally just fly to London just for that show. Although I did end up making it a trip back home as well. So she booked that months in advance for me. Best birthday present ever. And that was something that was on my bucket list, to see David Gilmour play live. Never thought it would happen because it just seemed like he was done. And when he came back to do those shows, it became a reality. And that was so much more special than the Roger Waters show, as cool as that was. And I do love Roger Waters, but Gilmour was my guy. To see him live was an unforgettable experience, especially in the Royal Albert Hall. This building just feels so special and has such a history to it. And I was literally in the seat, the furthest you could possibly get away from the stage. I was like right in the middle, right at the top, right at the back. And it was an amazing seat. You know, I mean, it's a big building, but it's not too big. You can really get a good view anywhere, I feel like, the way that the seats are structured. But I'll never forget the first note he played from 5 a.m. from his new album. I just instantly could tell that was his guitar tone and him playing it. And it was just, it was awesome. It was such a great show. An amazing set, you know, with his new stuff. He played some old stuff he hadn't played in a long time. And I won't go into a full talk about that because I could go on forever about that show, but it was really special. And it would be a dream if I could see him again with Connie, because again, she really likes Pink Floyd and his stuff in particular. So that would be special to share it with her, but I don't know what the future is with him. You never know, I suppose. So yeah, there's been lots of ways in which I have memories with Pink Floyd, either going to see members of the band play or just these pivotal moments in my life where I felt so shit and down, and then I've been inspired by their music just to keep going, just to keep putting one foot in front of the other, in no particular, you know, direct way, you know, but just the excitement I felt from listening to something so exciting and interesting and that made me think about stuff. And actually in 2010, I wrote a book that was all about their music, and it feels very fan fictiony. I think it's about a guy in the 70s who very much like me went through a bad breakup and depression, and discovered the music of Pink Floyd, and then went on to go and see them live, and his experience with that. And there's a romance story tied in with it too. And I think that book features some of my best writing, and it also features some of my absolute dog shit worst. There's a lot of fan fiction-y stuff in that, and it's something that unfortunately I could never really finish up and release anywhere. But I have fond memories of writing it. At least it was fun to dive into that world, I suppose. So Now I'm going to talk about my ranking of Pink Floyd albums. Super Troll says hi, and Infinite Skittles says, I know next to nothing about Pink Floyd, but finding myself becoming interested in listening to you talk about them. Cool. I hope you mean interested in listening to them after hearing me talk about them, because that'd be cool. And I don't know if I could maybe leave this stream with some recommendations, but my ranking from least favorite to most favorite would be, and there's 15 albums. So number 15, The Final Cut. It always felt to me like just kind of offcuts from The Wall that Roger Waters never used, and it just feels like a Roger Waters solo album to me. I've never given it the full time, to be fair, but it never really jumped out at me whatsoever. Number 14, Ummagumma, which I don't like the original music on that. I mean, I think there's a song called was it Roger Waters wrote it? Several small species of furry animals gathered together in a cave, grooving with a pict. Yeah, I don't know. It's, you know, getting into kind of Alan's psychedelic breakfast territory there, which is the band a bit too excessive, I think. Although that was an interesting album where they had it was a double album, 4 sides, and each side, you know, one of the band members did their own music. So I don't think it worked that well. But it has some live versions of their really good songs, so I kind of like it still. Number 13, Obscured by Clouds. It's an interesting one for them, but not really overly memorable to me. There's a few good songs on it, but that I like more than Ummagumma, I suppose. But apart from that, not so much. Number 12, Atom Heart Mother. Never really gotten into this one either, but it has one of my favorite songs, Fat Old Son. So that alone kind of makes it rise above the other 3 I just talked about. Number 11, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, the album that came out 50 years ago today. It's fun to listen to this. It's a fun album. There's some really good songs on it. Lucifer Sam has really grown on me. Bike is just a funny one. You know, I've got a bike. You can ride it if you like. It's got a basket, a bell that rings, and things to make it look just like the flowing kind of poetic lyric writing of Syd Barrett was such a cool part of that early Pink Floyd period. And so it's an enjoyable album, but not one of my favorites, I suppose. Number 10, More, which was a soundtrack album they did for a film. There's some great songs on there. I love Green is the Color. David Gilmour's voice at his most kind of light and feminine almost, I think. It's a really beautiful song. Number 9, A Saucer Full of Secrets. I don't like the song A Saucer Full of Secrets very much, but I love Jug Band Blues. What a weird fucking song, and so haunting. You know, I think it was one of those ones where they said to Syd Barrett, you know, you can do what you want, and he hired in this weird kind of band to do this kind of trumpet, but it's just really strange. But it sounds like the last vestiges of this genius. You know, this guy whose brain was slowly getting burned away by the acid he was on or whatever drugs he was taking, LSD, and there's these glimpses of brilliance in there, but it just doesn't quite work. But yet there's something so interesting about this song that, you know, I really like it in a weird kind of way for some reason. And there's some other really good songs on that album as well. Number 8, Metal. It is a great album, and maybe people would be kind of shocked that it's below some other albums. You know, Metal's a great album, but I much prefer the version of Echoes, their epic 20-minute song, on the Live in Pompeii album, or film, whatever you want to call it. That's the version of Echoes that I love more than the studio version, I think. Maybe I need to go back and listen to it, but you know, Metal's great. You know, one of these days, some great songs on there, but I kind of prefer the Pompeii version more than anything. That's kind of my preferred version of the song. So the album Metal goes down a little bit in my rankings. Number 7, The Endless River, which to some purists might be a big, like, holy shit, to put The Endless River above Metal. But I tell you what, it was a special one. You know, it was the only time I got to be around for a Pink Floyd album getting released as a fan. Does that make me biased towards it? Absolutely, but it's the kind of stuff I really like. It was offcuts from The Division Bell, worked into new stuff, but you know, there's just some great skins. You know, Nick Mason getting back on the drums again, you know, and really delivering something cool for the first time in a long time that was more centric to him. It's an instrumental album, something they'd never really done before, and I just love that concept. There's some fantastic pieces of music in there, haunting pieces of music. I forget what the track name is, but they used a recording of Richard Wright playing on the organ at Royal Albert Hall from like 1968, and then you have Gilmour playing over it in 2014. It's this weird kind of time travel between these two friends, you know, and some really special songs on that. And the last track, Louder Than Words, I do love it. Some of the lyrics are a bit bad, you know. We bitch and we fight, diss each other on sight. It's like, ew, that's a bit of a tough one to swallow, but I do love the song, and the solo is really nice. Number 6, A Momentary Lapse of Reason, another one that isn't as big on a lot of people's lists. I love the 80s feeling of it. It's like Pink Floyd, but 80s-ized, and I kind of enjoy that stuff. There's some songs in there I really dig. Dogs of War, On the Turning Away is a real favorite. One Slip, I love One Slip. That was one of those songs I listened to, and I just formed an entire story, like a movie in my head, of what the song was about. Number 5, The Wall. When I have the time to, I do love to listen to that from start to finish. It's a bit of a task, but it's a real fun story to take you on. The movie is interesting, but the album, the original album, is great. And some of those moments where Gilmour is present, you know, like Young Lust, which is a great one, and Comfortably Numb, obviously, Run Like Hell. But I think Roger Waters really pulled off something cool with that. And I think Darren Locke said that you kind of need to be a bit of an angsty teenager or young person to enjoy this album in its fullest. And I think there's probably something to that, if I'm not misquoting him too much. But The Wall is one that I am a big fan of, I have to say, even if it's nowhere near my favorite kind of iteration of the band as a whole. I think that's Roger Waters' crowning achievement to me. Well, actually, no, maybe not, thinking about it. Well, yeah, it's his crowning achievement in terms of something that was kind of his, completely almost. Although some of those great moments like Comfortably Numb came from David Gilmour's recordings and things. Number 4, Animals. On any given day, Animals could be my number 1. I love this album so much. It's so different, you know, 5 songs. I guess another album has 5 songs, but really long, but like just such an amazing piece of music, and obviously a huge social commentary on you know, politicians, you know, the way the world works, the kind of pecking order, and every song named after kind of, you know, pigs, 3 different ones, Pigs on the Wing, sheep, dogs. Dogs is an incredible piece of music. I think that's such a good song. Sheep, what an amazing outro that has, you know, just this proper angry guitar work, angry lyrics. It's really cool. Number 3, The Division Bell. Love this album. It has 2 songs in it that are eternally meaningful to me, which I won't go into too many details of, but it has Coming Back to Life and High Hopes are very special songs to me, and arguably more special songs than any of the other songs that Pink Floyd have done. But I think it's a brilliant album. Lost for Words is a great one. Marooned is a beautiful instrumental piece. I just love this version of Pink Floyd, you know, the 90s version, the Gilmour, Wright, Mason era. Because obviously Momentary Lapse of Reason was after Roger Waters had left, but it was more of a David Gilmour solo album. But the Division Bell was more of a group effort, and the last one they really did together. So I love the Division Bell. And again, I could go into far more detail with these, but I'm trying to kind of skim through them. Number 2, Dark Side of the Moon. I think it's probably their best album. Such a complete experience. These songs about all the things that we face in life, you know, mortality, you know, money, time passing, you know, faith. There's all these different themes in it that are quite broadly, I suppose, presented, but it's one of the most creative pieces of music I think ever done. It's hard to say the most, but one of the most, I think. It has to have that. I mean, it's such an iconic album, from the album cover, but you know, just to the songs. And it was almost a shame that Money became such a big single hit for them, because it was almost more of a point to be a part of the full album than anything else. But some incredible Money. What a great song. The saxophone in that is so good, and I don't think the solo in Money gets enough credit. I think it's one of the best things Gilmour has ever done on a guitar. It's such an incredible solo and such an incredible album. You know, you go from instrumental to these kind of sequencing, you know, the sequencing of On the Run, which, you know, On the Run, who would ever listen to that outside of the album anyway? But it's such a, you know, it just takes you on this trip, I suppose. In which case I could see the merits of listening to this stuff while under the influence of certain drugs. which I've never done, I have to say. Well, maybe I have a little bit at one point, but not fully. You know, I've never really been, whoa, what a trip, you know, but it has that kind of that feel to it. But there's more to it than just that. It's not just this kind of druggy album, which so many people have kind of painted it as, I think. Yeah, an amazing album. My number one, of course, is Wish You Were Here. My favorite album of all time, I think. Love every song. I think Shine On You Crazy Diamond is a beautiful ode to their front man, who they kind of probably treated a little bit badly in their booting him from the band when he kind of went a bit mad with his brain and all that stuff, which is, again, just so tragic and heartbreaking. And it's a melancholic kind of celebration of who he was, and this huge album long kind of almost tribute to him in a way. But also you have Welcome to the Machine and Have a Cigar, which are scathing critiques on the music industry. And so you have this band that had such a huge success with Dark Side of the Moon, this worldwide success to the likes that they'd never experienced before. And they followed up with an album that is really laced in criticism on the music industry, which I love. I love the balls of that. And you can argue how much balls it takes to write a song like that when you're already making millions of dollars, but I think it's kind of gutsy. And then you have Wish You Were Here, which is just one of the most simple and beautiful songs ever written. You know, that I think anyone could listen to Wish You Were Here and find something new in it that relates to them and to someone that they care a lot about. And that's kind of when music becomes really special. And yeah, so that's it. I do have a couple of comments. I'll get to those, I suppose. Nintendo 2009 says, sup? Not much. Just doing this live stream. Daniel Moore says, are you getting the David Gilmour live in Pompeii at the cinemas where you are, September the 13th? Yes, they are showing the David Gilmour live in Pompeii film in the cinemas here in September, and I will absolutely not be going to see it. I would love to, but they're kind of pricing it more like a concert, so it's like 30 quid or something. I was actually talking to someone about this today. Well, we'll wrap up with this, I suppose, but the David Gilmour Live in Pompeii show, which was part of the tour that I went to in 2015, they're releasing it on Blu-ray, like the full concert, and it's like 19 quid on Amazon. The Blu-ray of the show, the complete show, 19 quid. That's fair, right? Filmed in 4K. It's no doubt going to be an incredible presentation of his tour and his show, but there's a different version with a second Blu-ray that has like 4 hours of special features, documentaries, you know, tour documentaries and things like that, the stuff I really like. But it also has some tracks that don't appear on the first Blu-ray, so it doesn't have the complete concert on the standalone release. If you want to get like the full concert with all the songs, or most of them, because I think it's taken from 2 nights, you have to buy the version that has the second Blu-ray. Do you know how much the second version costs? 50 fucking quid. 50 fucking quid. 19 quid to 50. You're paying £31 for another Blu-ray. Absolute extortionism at its fucking dirt worst. And like a sucker, I'm probably going to pick it up because I want those 3 hours of documentaries and extra tracks. So yeah, there's that. So on top of that, there's no way I'm going to be able to go to the cinema to see it. I'd love to, but I'm going to have to just plonk down for the extortionate box set, and just that'll be the money I spend on it, I guess. AK Film says hello. Do you know when the movie marathon is coming out? In about 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to guess. Don't hold me to it, but by the end of the month, it'll be out there. I'm really looking forward to finishing it. Hopefully you can't hear that fucking mowing outside. Yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing it. I'm getting close. There's still some stuff left to do, but it should be a really good one. I'm really happy with the marathon so far. Cineworld, with the unlimited card, they're charging it £5. Yeah, that would be more doable, I think, but it is what it is. And AK Film says, how long is the movie marathon? It's looking to be about 4 hours, I think. Hopefully I'm going to try and edit it down to a little under 4 hours, but yeah, it's kind of reaching my goal to not be anywhere near as long as last year, so I'm really happy with the length. It's still a long video, but it's not as excessive as last year. So anyway, the mowing is happening right outside the fucking window now, so we're going to leave it there. Pink Floyd, my favorite band. 50 years of albums, and it is what it is. There's no more coming. Do you want to bring the mowing into my room? Make it a bit louder? No? Okay. What is your favorite movie so far this year? It is War of the Planet of the Apes, which just about beats Logan, I think. So yeah, we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. Some recommendations if anyone wants to get into Pink Floyd very quickly. I would recommend going for The Dark Side of the Moon. Listen to it all the way from start to finish. And Pink Floyd is a band you can't just kind of listen to at any given moment. It's not a band where you can put any song on for any occasion. It is kind of a melancholic band for the most part. So the best way to experience Pink Floyd, I think, outside of being at a concert back in the 70s, is to listen to it with your headphones on in the dark alone. That's the best way to and really get all of that sound and all of those layers. So Dark Side of the Moon is your go-to spot if you haven't listened to any Pink Floyd before. Then follow up with Wish You Were Here, and then just kind of feel your own way out, I think. But that's kind of the best starting point for me. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this kind of personal discussion live stream. And AK Films, I don't really have much excitement for those films. I'll probably see them when they come out, but nothing too much to add on that, unfortunately. So anyway, thanks for joining and watching along, and I'll see you in the next one.